Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peter Watches TV. Today I want to talk about one of the newest true crime documentaries that has just hit the internet. It is streaming now on Netflix, and that is My Father, the BTK Killer. And it is highlighting the story of Kerri Rawson, who is the daughter of Dennis Rader, who is the BTK Killer. So I probably need to give you a little history on my interest of the BTK Killer before I get into this review, because it has a lot to do with why I was kind of hesitant to even watch this documentary to begin with. To be honest with you, I had very little interest to watch this documentary. And the reason why is, for about 5 or 6 years, I hosted a true crime book club with my good friend Mel. And every month we would pick a true crime book to read. I think we read about every serial killer that's out there. We actually used to do a summer of serial killers where May, June, July, and August we would read specifically about a certain serial killer. And so we had actually read Kerri Rawson's book that she wrote in 2019 called, I think it's called The Serial Killer's Daughter. And so we had read that book, and I think we read it as soon as it came out in 2019. And here's my review of the book. It's not good. And I think, in all honesty, having watched the documentary now, probably where she was emotionally at the time that she wrote the book is a lot different than where she's at now in 2025, because she probably, if the book came out in 2019, I think she references 2015 a lot in the documentary. So I think she probably started writing the book around 2015 to 2017 and then got it published, and it came out in 2019. The book was not good. The book was, to be honest with you, it was a rather bizarre book. And the book is really not so much about Dennis Rader being the BTK killer. It's really about her fantasizing kind of about what she wishes or what she remembers her relationship with her father being. And it's interesting because when you watch the documentary, if you watch the documentary, she plays it up to be that her father was very controlling when she was growing up and that he was really difficult to be around. I don't remember that so much from the book. I remember a very long part of the book being about the hiking trip that they take to the Grand Canyon. In fact, it's kind of been this ongoing joke between my friend Mel and I since we read the book for the True Crime Book Club, that, I mean, I would say a third of the book was about this hiking trip to the Grand Canyon, and like her dad being like, "Where are you?" I mean, it was endless. I mean, I can remember when we were reading it and I was like, does she ever get out of the Grand Canyon? And so I just didn't know, like, going into this, if this was going to be the same thing. In the book, she really kind of plays it up that they had this really good relationship and that she's kind of romanticizing the relationship that she had with her father, not in a romantic sense, but like, you know, in a positive way, that like they had this really good relationship and she never would have known that he was a serial killer. At the time that her book came out, and more has come out since then about the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, but at that time, there was a lot of criticism, especially of Dennis Rader's wife, that how could she possibly not know that her husband was a serial killer and the BTK killer and things like that. And so at the timing that the book came out, to be honest with you, we were really excited to read it because we were like, you know, now you see a lot of, there's like on TikTok and things like that, you see children or family members of serial killers and, you know, convicted killers and things like that coming out and talking and explaining their story and trying to educate and help other people. At the time that the book came out, that was not really happening a whole lot. I mean, there were certain situations where you would hear about that, but that wasn't really happening a lot. And so Kerri Rawson's book was one of the first ones, really, that we got to hear from the point of view of especially a daughter of a serial killer. And so we were very interested in reading it. And I mean, she talks about in the documentary about it being a bestseller. And I kind of was like, it was? Like, it was bad. Like, it was boring. It was a really boring book. Like, you didn't learn anything about Dennis Rader. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm sure she mentioned it in the book, but I didn't even know that he was like the president of the church congregation. Like, I don't remember any of that from the book. I remember reading the book, and at the beginning of it, She talks about the police or the FBI showing up at her house in Michigan. She talks about sitting at the kitchen table. I mean, this is kind of how the book goes. She talks about sitting at the kitchen table, and I can remember her talking about like putting sugar in a coffee cup and talking about this coffee cup for a long time, and then her husband being there. And then she talks about how like they went home and then they all kind of like secluded together. She references in the documentary about how her mom made some comment about like, it feels like your dad died because this is almost kind of like a funeral, like we're all gathering around with a lot of food and stuff. I do remember that from the book. She talks about that in the book. So to be honest with you, I didn't learn anything, and I will also say this, I had not seen the show Mindhunter at the time. I just watched it last year and loved it and loved Mindhunter. And the reason I'm referencing that is because if you've watched the TV show Mindhunter, they go and they talk to several different serial killers, but the background story that they always kind of, like, they don't talk about it, but he's killing as the storyline is going on is Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. Like, have the show going on for several more seasons, which people are always speculating it's going to come out as a movie. It's going to come out. The reason it ended was because it was so expensive to produce. But like, had it continued to go on, it was going to go towards them catching the BTK killer. I mean, that was always like every third episode or something, like they would show Dennis Rader at the beginning of it, like going into somebody's house or stalking or something like that. So that was really where my interest kind of grew, was watching Mindhunter, in all honesty. And so when we read the book, any interest that I had in the BTK killer and hearing about him, and I think I watched another documentary at that time because I was like, I don't really know a lot about him other than what I've heard and, you know, serial killer lore and things like that, and seen some of the pictures and whatever. But other than that, which are very disturbing, but other than that, I didn't really know a lot about him. So when this documentary came out, actually, Mel, my friend, who is my book club partner this weekend, she texted me and she said she was watching it. And I said, what do you think so far? And she was like, I think she was like 20 minutes in, and she joked and she said, well, she's already mentioned hiking like twice or something like that. And I was like, oh God, I just don't want to watch this. But last night, I was like, okay, I'm trying to react to all the newest true crime documentaries that come out. And so I do have a history with this. I do know the story. Like, I want to watch this documentary. I have to be honest with you, I was pleasantly surprised in this documentary. I thought it was rather well done. It's really short. It's like an hour and 35 minutes or something like that. Actually, I have it pulled up right here. I don't know if it says on here the timing of it. Well, the synopsis is, my father, the BTK killer, witnessed the case of a family man and a scout leader, Dennis Rader, which they only reference him being a scout leader, like, in one part of it, like, for 2 seconds, who had a double life as the BTK killer. His daughter, Kerri shares her experiences with her father's crimes. So I think that that's the synopsis that I had read, and I was like, this is going to be all about Kerri Rawson again. This is going to be, and like, mind you, like, her story, she has a story to tell, right? Like, I'm not taking that away from her, and I can't even imagine what she's gone through. For those of you that watch my drama channel, I've also covered it over here. The Fox Hollow Farm case that takes place in Indianapolis, where I live, who the serial killer, Herb Baumeister, like, his family, people are constantly trying to find out stuff, right? And so, and I think that the family is not to blame for what the serial killer did. And I think that online, we see a lot of that. And she even talks about that. She talks about having gotten a lot of threatening messages from people, and that people, like, would reach out to her and say horrible things to her, and they even said that there should have been an 11th victim, implying that it should have been her and things like that. I mean, she didn't do anything, right? Like, it wasn't like she chose who her father was going to be in life, and it wasn't like she definitely didn't choose him. I mean, nobody would choose this, right? So I think, and that's a big part of the documentary, is her talking about, like, none of her family has really gone public with this, and so she wanted to kind of regain her voice and talk about it. And that's why she wrote the books. It was like freedom for her a little bit. And also, she had seen a interview that my God, Stephen King had done, and talking about, like, basing a story, like a short story that he had written off of the BTK killer. And she was like, and she also felt like, because one of the things that had happened in the court trial was the way that they got Dennis Rader was that they went to her college, and she had a pap smear at college, and so they used her DNA from the pap smear to convict her father with matching DNA, because they found out that that whoever the DNA was from was one of the children of the BTK killer. And so she felt like she had kind of been used a little bit to convict her father. So she was like, this is my time to come out and tell the story. So that's why she decided to write the book in 2019. There's more to it than that, but she talks about it. So I was really pleasantly surprised with this documentary. It was a lot different than I thought it was going to be. When it starts with her in Michigan, and it starts on the day that the police or the FBI come to her house and tell her that her dad's been arrested. And it's like the way that the documentary starts is almost exactly the way that the book starts. And just watching it, I was like, I'm so not into this. Like, I really was like, I just almost was going to turn it off. I'm on the 4th season of Shetland right now on BritBox, and I'm so into that. I was like, I've got Dragula to watch. I've got so many shows to watch that, like, if this is going to be bad, like, I don't want to watch it. And I'm really happy that I watched it, because I thought it was really well done. I thought they honored a lot of the victims in a really honorable, they honored him in honor. They really, I think, paid him homage. They shared the victim statements. There was a lot that I had not seen before watching previous documentaries about Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. So when it starts with Kerri Rawson telling her story. But really, like, and talking about, like, how it was the worst day of her life when her dad got arrested, and she still remembers that day, and it was snowing, and she was home, whatever. So I thought the whole thing was going to be about Kerri Rawson. It really isn't. She's actually, I would say, only like a fourth of the documentary. The rest of the documentary is really like a very short version of the tail end of the investigation. Well, not the tail end. Some of it is like from the early days, like in 1974. But it goes into like pretty much like the end of the investigation and how they caught Dennis Rader. They show a lot of the interview tapes, which I had not seen before. They showed a lot of the interview tapes of when they interviewed him for the investigation. They showed, like, them arresting him and things like that. They showed a lot of things that I had not seen before. It's heavily about the investigation. I think they do a really nice job of talking about each of the victims. I thought they did a really nice job of talking about the the family. I think it's the Osera family, who, like, 4 of the members were killed, and they talk about the victim statements. They show the victim statements in the courtroom. Like, a lot of it that they did in there, I was not aware of. I don't remember if she didn't include it in the book, I don't think, but the prosecutor in the case, she really wanted to kind of shame and embarrass Dennis Rader because he was very proud of his crimes that he had committed. He called them projects. And so she did a lot of things in showing, you know, testimony and evidence to kind of shame and embarrass Dennis Rader. Well, what happened was, during the sentencing hearing of when the victims' families could come out and speak, after they were done speaking, Dennis Rader was able to get up and give a statement, and they all walked out. Like, they basically saying, we don't want to hear what you have to say. Like, we have nothing to, we're done. Like, we said our statements and we're out. All the victims' families left the room. He even says in there, they show him, and he goes, should I continue? And then it's interesting because Kerri's attitude in the book is so much different than it is in the documentary. And I think that a lot of time has changed. The other thing is that since the book has come out, she's been working with kind of going back through his cases. She's been working with the Wichita police and going back through his cases and trying to help the police and trying to find out, like, are there other cases that maybe he did that he could give them information on? And one of the things that she did was that she went to go see him in prison. The police asked her to go see him in prison. At that time, she was going through a lot of his notes and his notebooks and things like that. And she had found in there that there was, like, noting that he had said something about Kerri, like, in the bedroom and whatever. And so then she started speculating, well, was I essayed by my father? Was, like, he living out his, was I practice for his fantasies and things like that? And she had no memory of it. She didn't know. And so the police were like, when you go to see him in prison, she went with 2 investigators. And they said, when you go, don't bring it up or it'll just shut him down. So she goes, and at this point, and this is where you can tell that there's a switch from the book. You know, one of the other reasons why I really didn't want to watch this documentary is that I just watched the documentary on HBO Max not too long ago called The Serial Killer's Apprentice. And in that documentary, it heavily shows the psychiatrist that interviewed. I remember his name, but anyway, Earl something. But Henley, is that his name? Anyway, it heavily shows a psychiatrist who is now getting a lot of criticism over, I believe, her defense, Brian Komberger from the Idaho, the 4 case. And so that documentary felt very much to me like a selling of her book. Like, it was, her book, I think, was called The Serial Killer's Apprentice. And so it was like, you watch a documentary, and it's like, oh, I want to go read the book. It felt like marketing to me for a book. So when I went into this, I was like, I knew that Kerri Rawson had put out a second book. I did not read it in 2023. And so I was like, do I want to watch this documentary if this is going to be the same thing? Is this now what true crime documentaries are turning into, just sales pieces for books? It didn't feel that way to me. I will say that. It didn't make me want to go read her second book, but it didn't feel that way to me. But what it did make me realize, having read her book previously, is that where she is at emotionally now is a lot different than where she was when she wrote her first book. So if you're going to read her first book, I would suggest to please read it with a critical eye, that where she's had a lot of growth and change and a lot of healing from that. Because she talks about going to see her dad in prison, and that he just wants to kind of go down memory lane. And she's like, I'm not here for that. I'm here to ask you these questions. And she sees him switch on a dime. And she's like, he just like changed immediately. And she was like, I was still holding on to this image of who my father was. Because she would talk throughout the documentary about how there was this disconnect. And she couldn't really, like, she knew the crimes that he had committed. She knew that her father was a BTK killer. But like, with her image of who her father was growing up, what she knew of him, it didn't match. Like, there was a disconnect for her, which I think is a really, like, it makes a lot of sense, right? And so she said, in that moment of being in the prison, she saw him as everybody else had seen him, as like this cold-blooded, like nasty, I think she said the word narcissist. I mean, she saw him for that person in that moment. And she just started spewing out all this stuff at him. And he even said something, it was like, because he said to her something about, you're here just to get famous, basically implying that she wrote the books to get famous. And it was like that moment that she's like, I would choose to go through this to get famous, because of the, and he's like, your actions, he said something like, your actions led to you made your own choices, or something like that. And she just started spewing all this stuff out. She hasn't had contact with her father since then. She's still estranged from her mother. She didn't talk about that at all. They're very, very protective of Dennis Rader's wife in the documentary. They're very, very protective of her. They have been for a long time, like on media and things like that. Like, every picture of her on the documentary was like, they had it like shadowed out. They don't, like, one person said her name on the documentary. I was kind of surprised they didn't bleep it out, because it was like they were talking, it was like a family friend, and said, well, Kerri and so. And I was kind of surprised they left it in there, because they did such a good job of trying to hide her identity. And actually, I think the reason why is she's gotten a lot of shit through the years through the media of like, how could you possibly not know? Her Baumeister here in Indianapolis, his wife got the same thing. Any spouses or family members of serial killers always get that. How could you possibly not know? Well, I think it's an interesting question. And when I was watching it last night, and I'll say, having read a lot of true crime, I've had the same question. I've had, like, how could you possibly not know? Like, one of the things they show is that when they went into his house, he literally had a kill kit sitting right on top of where the coats are that had, like, duct tape and a gun in it. Like, his wife wouldn't go by there every single day. Like, I know what's in my house. You know what I mean? Like, how could you go by there every single day and not see a kill kit? And so they were like, it doesn't, like, make sense. And so I've had that stance before too. But then let's also think about the fact that Dennis Rader was somebody that had evaded the police and didn't get caught for 30 years. So he was obviously very good and very adept at living a double life. At the end of the documentary, I'm like trying not to ruin it in case you guys want to watch it, because I do think it's worth a watch. I do. I think it's one of the, you know, I watch a lot of these serial killer true crime documentaries, and, you know, now it's been so many years since most of these people have come out that there just isn't a lot of new information. You know, there just isn't. It's like I said when I covered the JonBenet Ramsey case. It's like, do we need another JonBenet Ramsey documentary? Like, unless you're going to come out and say this person did it and we're convicting them, I don't want to see another JonBenet Ramsey documentary. I'm very interested in that case, but it's like the O.J. Simpson case. It's like it's a lot of speculation, and it's a lot of like, let's just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks, because they think people are just interested in it again. I'm like, unless you have something new to bring to the table, I don't want to hear about it. This documentary felt new to me. There was a lot about the investigation that I wasn't aware of. Like I said, said, I read the book. I did my research on it when we read the book. I mean, we had a live stream. We discussed it. I know a lot about this case now. And there were things that I didn't know when I watched this documentary that I was interested in it. And I will say, it was a little bit of a scary documentary watching it. And a lot of it that was scary was just his absolute coldness about the whole thing. And it's explaining it to the police and almost kind of taking pride in it and things like that. And I'm not somebody that loves those confession tape documentaries. Like, I've watched like one episode of a couple of them and I'm just kind of out. I'm like, I'm not real interested to just sit and listen to a tape for 4 episodes. I just don't love that. So I thought it was well done. It's interesting at the end of the documentary because the documentary, like I said, is called My Father, the Serial Killer. Her book is called A Serial Killer's Daughter. At the end of the documentary, she talks about, well, there was a point where she was like, she refers to this now as her job. I don't really know what she means by that. Like, in the documentary, she says, well, this is my job now. So I don't know if she means writing about her father. I don't know if she means working with the Wichita police. I didn't really understand what she meant by this is her job now. But at some point, she says something about, like, she just has to kind of move through this. She has since divorced since she wrote the first book. So I don't know what happened. She doesn't talk about her husband at all. Her husband is a little bit in the first book. So I don't know anything about that. She doesn't talk about it at all. She goes back. There's one part that's really interesting. She goes back to where her home was that she grew up in, where Dennis Rader was arrested. They've leveled the house. So it's just land now. When the producers are out front, when she gets in her car, one of the neighbors across the street is like screaming at her and is like, get the hell out of here. And like, she doesn't know what it's like. We have to deal with this every day. Stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure people drive by there every single day, you know, to see the home of the BTK killer. At the end of it, she goes and she hangs out with like 2 of her high school friends. She's like, I've known them since middle school and high school. They know me as Kerri Rawson. She goes through this whole thing about how she, like, people want to look at her and call her like, and I understood what she was saying, but it just wasn't real clear how she said it. That, like, she's not just the daughter of a serial killer. Like, she's Kerri Rawson, and her father happens to be a serial killer named Dennis Rader, and he's the BTK killer. But she's not, like, she doesn't want to just be defined as, you know. So, anyway, I thought it was a really well-done documentary. I would recommend it. I'm glad I watched it. I'll be honest with you. I'm really glad I watched it because my attitude towards the book was just, I just didn't like it. I thought, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm interested in, you know, like, because I know that this is going to come up at some point in some discussion. A lot of people want to talk about, like, the Son of Sam laws, like writing about, and that does not extend necessarily to family members. And a lot of states have taken away the Son of Sam laws. So the Son of Sam laws were that you could not financially benefit by writing or selling media rights about criminal acts that have had taken place, specifically killings. And so, and I think it started in New York with David Berkowitz and the Son of Sam killings, because I think he was going to write a book about it. That's where it started. A lot of states have lifted that law, actually, because I've looked into it years ago with Gypsy Rose Blanchard and things like that. A lot of states have lifted that law. I mean, I'm sure that's how she makes the majority of her money, especially if she had a best-selling thing, and then she's going to crime. They show her at Crime Con. She goes to Crime Con. You know, she says she's working with trauma victims now, and she's trying to educate people. I think that's fantastic. I am such a believer in turning your wounds into wisdom. And I will say one thing, like, you can still see that there's like an undercurrent of kind of like bitterness of like how the public perceives her or treats her. And I think that that is unfair. I think that we're starting to see a turn of that a little bit, but she's probably suffered the majority of it because she was one of the first people that came out and spoke about having a family member that was a serial killer. I think we don't have the language to talk about that. We don't know what to do. But for that reason alone, I'm really glad that I watched a documentary because it gives me a different perspective on her. And I am such a believer that we change and we grow, and I'm not the same person I was yesterday, let alone 5 years ago. And she's had a lot of experiences that have changed her mind, and she's not the same person when you watch a documentary that she was when she wrote the book. And I thought it was a fantastic documentary. And you do learn a lot about Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. It's not just about Kerri Rawson, the daughter. I mean, that's what it's titled because they think it's gonna get people interested in it. And she does talk a lot about her books in there, but it's more about the investigation of Dennis Rader than it is about their relationship. So, and not a lot of hiking. They don't talk a lot. They do talk about the hiking. They do show pictures from the Grand Canyon, but it's not a lot. Anyway, let me know if you've watched it in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.